Good afternoon, everybody. Like she said, my name is Devora Henderson, and I'm the CEO of Elevate Clinical Research, and we are a network of sites here in the U.S. And we'll have everybody kind of introduce themselves and like what they do at their respective companies. Greg, you want to go first?
Sure. Hey, folks. I'm Greg Goldmacher. So my role at Merck is leading the clinical imaging and pathology function. So all of the trial outcomes that are assessed using scans or tissues are my team's responsibility.
Great. So I am Paige Gonzales. I'm at Bristol Myers Squibb in New Jersey, and I help lead the clinical feasibility for our trials.
I'm Tom Farrand, and I'm CEO co-founder of Delfa. We build conversational AI agents to automate the pre-screening, scheduling, and reminding of patients into clinical research. We're live on 60 phase 2, phase 3 trials across the US, UK, Europe, and Australia and New Zealand.
Kevin Anderson, Moderna. I've got kind of 3 roles right now. So I'm an early development portfolio lead. I had monitoring oversight in the Therapeutics and Development Group, or Therapeutics and Oncology Group, and I'm also leading a number of AI transformation initiatives.
I'm Esther Shamir. I'm a ClinOps consultant. My clients are mostly in the small biotech space. I've had the pleasure of recently working with Tom and an AI tool that his company has developed for one of my clients that is running a study for a bleeding disorder. And so I hope we get to talk about that a little bit later. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Is everybody finished with the first question? Yep. Okay, go to the second one. How familiar are you with AI in a clinical setting? And what does AI even mean in a clinical setting?
Just say one of them. I am the AI.
That was Gustav over there. That was his answer.
Nice one.
A lot of people are learning. Yeah, it works. All right, one last question for everybody. Good. Everybody's good?
It's a good mix.
Good. Okay, let me get started. Tom, my first question is for you.
Uh-oh.
Delfa is using AI to transform operational workflows. From your vantage point, what unique advantage do you see when AI is integrated thoughtfully with human decision-making in clinical trials?
Yeah, good question. So I think that as you walk around the exhibit hall and in the current wave of sort of AI with Gen AI and AI agents, I think the 2 big advantages that people are pushing are speed and scalability. So the ability to take your workflows, do them much faster, and do them without necessarily like the bottleneck of a human team within that. And I think that's great, but I think when we've deployed these agents into the real world, we've seen that there are deeper benefits that actually come out that as you push these more into human-led workflows that you start to see. The first of which is the AI actually helping to inform human decision-making. So usually it's humans informing the AI what to do, but we've seen that the inverse can happen. So to give you a concrete example of this, we do voice calls to pre-screen participants, and our AI agents can automate that process. So it's chatting through, determining whether they're eligible, and then scheduling them in for a visit. What we've seen is that the analytics from those calls, such as how often we reach people at certain times of the day, is 11 a.m. a good time to to call participants for an anxiety trial. That can actually inform human-based outreach, and so we can combine those two and have the AI make the human workflows better. I think the other things that we've seen is it changes the ways of working for a lot of our clients. And so in the recruitment world, a lot of human effort is wasted on outbound reach, kind of trying to get people on the phone, trying to get people to engage, dialing into voicemails, lots of wasted effort. But what we found is that the AI can actually take over this much lower value work and and push inbound traffic to the sites, meaning that the coordinators and the recruiters at those sites have to do less of the outbound drudgery, and they can focus on these higher value, higher intent participants who want to join clinical research, while the AI takes away that piece off their plate. So I think those are the two kind of deeper insights that we've seen now that we've started deploying into the real world.
And you can also like capture more data that would normally take a recruiter and a coordinator a long time to collect, such as con meds and medical history. That's a little bit tedious to do. Okay, for a question for the panel. What are some aspects of trial operations where AI enhances human judgment rather than just trying to replace it? Anybody can answer.
One thing I would say is site identification. So I've been meeting recently with some vendors who have some pretty incredible tools, and we all, regardless of the therapeutic area, we generally know, or we think we know, who the right investigators are because we continue to work with them. But what we don't know is how they'll work with a particular with a particular protocol. And so it's been different technologies that we've been seeing, but what they're able to do is pull a lot of information that we wouldn't otherwise have, add it, pull from our own data pool, and then inform. And, in the process, we may well be able to remove some of the sites we thought would be a good fit. So I think there's a lot of promise in that space.
And where do they collect that data from? Like, where are you getting that information from?
So one of the ones we talked to, they're using agents to go out globally and find whatever information they can on the centers. Some others are using a combination of their own LLM plus a frontier model, and then others still are using proprietary databases.
Okay, nice.
To add to his comment too, it can help you identify which sites are good for you to go to, but also maybe the ones that aren't. It can, something that we've used it for is looking at the patterns of what's worked in some protocols and not others, so that if a site is not enrolling, then we can almost try to predict if it's going to be non-enrolling on specific protocols that come through that are similar to how they did in the past.
Right.
So, but it's helpful when you have a very large data lake on your side to be able to pull from, especially when it comes to qualitative data.
So what happens if it's like a new investigator that doesn't have any research experience? What kind of data are y'all pulling in order to qualify those types of doctors or investigators?
Yeah, for us, we look at benchmark trials that they've worked on and the competitive trials that are in the market. Also, just what the prevalence is of the patients in their specific area to even know if there's a pool within that area. So there's other auxiliary information that we can look on if you don't have that.
Right. Anybody else want to answer? Yeah. Okay, Paige, in your analytic leadership role, how have you seen AI accelerate timelines, whether it's in study design, site selection, monitoring, anything? Yeah, so I think it's so important to have AI because we have these massive databases and a lot of qualitative data and a very large data lake, because we can get information from anywhere. The regulatory, commercial, you want to be pulling in a lot, especially when you're working on feasibility. And I think the importance of having AI is to be able to get you that first draft. It's to be able to pull through to identify those key trends that it's seeing, but ultimately it's hard to get that when you're looking at the regulatory benefits or you're looking at commercial aspects. You need that human interaction for that. So I think it's important that AI accelerates our insights, but humans provide the judgment. And together they can enable more efficient and resilient trials that can stand up to this current market. So when I fill out feasibility, do you think that it's going to help in the future to us not to answer the same question a million times on the feasibility form? So actually something we talked about in an earlier chat today too is something that can be very helpful
is if you're going to be doing feasibility, to have one feasibility that is the facility questions, the ones you're going to ask everybody every single time. Then you have that large data lake of all your sites, and the sites fill that out once every couple of years, because it's not like they're going to all of a sudden lose a freezer
Right.
and not replace it. You don't really need to ask them that for every single protocol.
Right.
But something we've been really focused on is optimizing our SFQs, our site feasibility questionnaires, to really only ask those deal breaker questions. What's going to bring a site to the trial, or what's going to rule them out? So your site feasibility questionnaire should really only be like 10, 20 questions, especially if you're asking sites to fill it out for every single protocol. But it really should be focused on your deal breakers. And if you're doing that, then you can mine a lot of that data from the feasibility overarching facility questionnaires. And when you do that, you'll have that data to know if a site is even good for your protocol from the get-go.
Right. Any strategies that have been like very effective that you've seen while doing feasibility for your team in general?
Many. I guess specifically, it depends on what indication that you're in. If you're in lung cancer, there are a lot of standard of cares. There is a lot going on in lung cancer. We have a lot of data. You can utilize that data, but if you're in rare disease, you have to be a little more specific. This is where I think country feasibility questionnaires come into play. A lot of times just larger companies do these, but there can be so much benefit, especially as you're building a protocol, because you're able to ask those questions at a country level where a country may say, oh, based on the protocol that's already written, there's a regulatory concern that I'm not able to participate in. But if you could hold protocol creation or finalization until after site feasibility, you can impact those a lot easier, and you could open yourself up to additional countries that you maybe didn't think of, or maybe out of your footprint. But then they may only be able to give you 3 sites, but those 3 sites may give you 10 patients,
Right.
where another country gives you 5 and maybe only gives you 2 patients. So I think the country feasibility questionnaire, although quite qualitative, which I think is why a lot of companies don't utilize it, can be so valuable when you are collecting your data, especially for those rare diseases.
So Kevin, Moderna has become known for moving at unprecedented speed. Where have you found AI can remove operational bottlenecks?
So in terms of the operational bottlenecks, I think we're going after them, I think, quite systematically. And it's public knowledge that we have thousands of GPTs deployed. And so I've been building a lot for my team and for the department. And I could give 3 specific examples where we've seen, some real gains. So one is a monitoring visit report reviewer.
Okay.
That the monitoring oversight leads are able to pop into it, and these can be, in the ID space, it can be 100+ page reports, and it'll give you a page and a half of the most critical information. So it'll tell you critical information on the site, on the CRA, what they're doing well, where they're struggling, potential QEs and CAPAs, what needs to be done next, as well as, conversation pointers with the PIs. And so that's been very helpful. I also built one for my CTAs that's a TMF GPT, and it's got the TMF index, ingested inside of it. And they just say, where do I file the following documents? And it'll give the zone, the artifact, its confidence level. And even if it doesn't know, it will tell them, I think it goes in this section for the following reasons. And then lastly, one that's been very much appreciated as well by the monitoring oversight leads is the protocol navigators. And so, a lot of these folks have 8, 9, 10 studies that they're on, and they can't possibly know all the details of the protocol, like the clinical trial teams would. And so they're able to upload the protocol, and it will extract whatever information they need in a paragraph or 2, and then it will tell them where to go. And so I think these are just some of the many examples of the tools that we're using, but we're starting to see a lot of time savings for the teams.
So you're doing that for your team at Moderna, but do you push that onto the site? So there those tools available for the site use, or not yet?
No, not yet. I mean, I love that you brought that up, because I've been thinking a lot about what can we bring to sites, and
Right.
that's very much on my mind, but right now it's internal. But what I love many things I love about Moderna besides our stock price, and what I enjoy is the fact that we share throughout the organization. We have our own internal GPT kind of app store,
Right.
And we're able to share with a lot of folks.
Yeah, I really like, we're trying to look at like what would be like a regulatory co-pilot that could just get all of the emails and put them in the right place. It's a lot of operational lift for us to do all that manual work, especially when an IRB approves 1,000 documents and you have to download and upload and download. There has to be a faster way for the sites where we can focus on patients and not on the back end stuff. So, great. For organizations that are just starting to implement AI, what early wins should we target to demonstrate value quickly? That's for everybody can answer. Anybody can answer.
Hello, is this work? Yeah.
Yeah.
I can take a stab at that. So I think for the patient-reported outcome AI tool that we're currently in the process of starting up, I think the thing that we found the most helpful is how quickly it could be built. So for example, let's say there's an EDC tool or another ePro or eCOA. Those things take 12, 16 weeks to build. Tom, I think you built the AI voice agent in like a day. And of course it requires testing and stuff like that. But I think if I could, tell senior leadership that we could have a system built in less than a week versus, 12 weeks to get a first patient data point in, that holds a lot of value, I think.
Yeah, and I think the key point there isn't that the AI tool is like you're building it very, very quickly to get it up and running. I think it's because these AI tools in a patient-facing capacity are in a natural modality for the patient. So they're not downloading a new app. They're not having to figure out a paper diary. In this case, it's just a phone call with the participant. There's less training, there's less onboarding that's required, and a lot of the effort, as we understand it from like the ePro sort of app side of things, is figuring out the user interface. Are patients going to understand it? Is that going to be clear? But in this instance, the AI is just having a natural language conversation with the patients. I think from a vendor point of view, to answer that question, it's like the better you know your problem, the better we can recommend a solution. When we have conversations with customers and potential customers and they just want AI, it's a very difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we have AI, but like, what are you trying to do with it? And so the better you understand that world, the more we can actually help to recommend whether we're a right fit or whether you should look elsewhere, and if at all AI is going to be useful for the problem that you're looking at.
I think also to add to that, AI gives us the data-driven backbone, but if you're not asking the right question, you're going to get the wrong answer.
Right.
So to emphasize what Tom said, like if we're going to analyze a large system, you should tell it the voice, you should tell it all of the details that you want to kind of narrow it down, and you'll get something that's a bit more human on that side.
I guess to add to that, the kind of the prototype example of AI use that everybody's familiar with is GPTs, which, what do? They can produce documents and they can analyze documents. So I know that in our organization, medical writing is using AI extensively, and that's, kind of clearly for authoring of protocols and consent forms and clinical study reports and those kinds of things. One of my earliest uses of it was where, I took exclusion criteria from a protocol and said, okay, generate the findings on a scan that would be that would be detectable by a trained radiologist that would identify these exclusion criteria. And it did a pretty good job. I mean, I had to go through and fix things a little bit, but it was excellent at generating a draft of that.
In terms of the early wins, and this is just to general AI use, because even at a company like Moderna, you would think everybody's using it all the time, but there are whole elements that are still just very light users. And what we found in our group for early wins was, doing monthly or sometimes twice a month labs to just walk people through prompt engineering, good prompts, bad prompts, what is a GPT, how to use them, how to build them. And I think just the voice feature alone, when I had, I gave a demo and people were like, oh my God, I didn't even know it could do that. I'm like, well, you just have to push that button. But I'm also kind of nerding out on it, so I get that. But I think that when people see it firsthand, it's been transformational. And then even a couple other things. One is the newsletters, which I know sounds like a 90s relic, but I think when they're full of use cases and, good prompts, all kinds of things, we've had a lot of enthusiasm. And then I think the champions, even if they're not necessarily super proficient yet, the folks that are very excited. I mean, a year and 3 months ago, I barely knew what I was doing, and now I'm building all kinds of tools. And early on, I was asking everyone, "Did you know it could do this or using that?" And they were like, "I don't use it." So it's like, but if you have people enthusiastically, sharing around the company, what we've seen is that really helps drive enthusiasm across the board.
Do you have a little bit of pushback on people that do not want to use the AI tools a lot?
Well, since our CEO says that we are all to use it at least 20 times a day, I don't think a lot of folks are going to acknowledge that.
I'm going to do that.
But the fun part, the fun part is I was able to get access to our internal metrics, and they can see down to the person where we are in a scatter plot. And I was very happy the other day to see myself as the only one in the upper right-hand corner. But I do think the tracking part is important because you can see where there are the pockets, whatever. Not everyone's necessarily trying. I think so many people, they just think they're too busy. And I just have to laugh because it's like, give me 20 minutes and I will show you why you're not too busy to save 5-10 hours a week.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Greg, at Merck, you're working with large and complex ecosystem. Can you share a real example where AI and human teams collaborated to solve a specific clinical development challenge?
Okay, so let me take this out of the operational and into kind of a more of a strategic realm. All right, this is going to take a little bit of background. So as an example, in oncology, the way we typically assess treatment efficacy, right, is you get a scan, you pick some tumors, you measure those, and then you do a series of scans, and you see whether those tumors are growing or shrinking, basically, and that gets translated into clinical trial endpoints. Okay, so a typical endpoint in early oncology is something called objective response rate, which is a proportionate to patients whose tumors shrank by a certain amount. Okay, here's the problem. That measurement is great at predicting the outcome we really care about, which is what? What do we really care about? Survival. Do the patients live longer? Okay, those measurements correlate well with survival at large N, where you have, but at small n, the correlation isn't great. And what that means is that anybody who's done cancer drug development for any length of time can think of examples of drugs that looked good based on response rate in those early phases, in phase 1B, phase 2A, and then got to late phase and failed to improve survival. And that's bad for patients. Also, from a sponsor point of view, that's, a few $100 million down the drain. Okay, but the problem is you're making those decisions about what you're going to take to late phase in those early phase trials where you got dozens of patients of data. Okay, now, so what can AI do for us? Okay, so again, there are better ways. There have been a bunch of academic work showing that if you take the total tumor burden and you plot it out over time, and then you ask the computer to fit some curves that extract basically a shrinking the tumor fraction that's sensitive to treatment, that's shrinking exponentially, and a tumor fraction that's growing, that's resistant to treatment, that's growing exponentially, and you back out the value that corresponds to that growth rate, that's a great predictor of survival. And that should make intuitive sense, right? Because how do tumors kill you? By growing. Right? That's what they do. Okay, so that would be a fantastic thing to measure to make better decisions in that early phase, in the early clinical phase. Here's the challenge. To really measure that, the optimal input for that. So the way you do it now is a radiologist looks at the scans and picks out a few tumors, and those are the things you measure. Okay? The problem is, what are you doing there? You're sampling. When you sample, there's a built-in assumption that the outcome you care about is driven by the average, because when you sample, that's what you're getting, right? You're estimating the population average. The problem is, it's not the average tumor that kills the patient. It's their worst tumor. It's the most aggressive, most rapidly growing, most treatment-resistant tumor. That's the one. But you don't know which one that is when you're first looking at the scan before treatment. And if you don't choose that one, you're blind to it, no matter how sophisticated your model is. Okay? So what you really want is you want every tumor measured, and ideally you want it outlined in 3D, not just with a little, single ruler measurement, and you want it on every time point. But radiologist time is really expensive. So what we've done is we've taken our database of trials, we've trained a model that will segment tumors in 3D, meaning it won't find them, and this is the key thing where the human AI collaboration is. If I point to the tumor on the scan, it'll draw it in 3D with excellent fidelity. Then it'll co-register all the scans in 3D space over time, and it'll propagate the segmented volume basically with modifying it each time, but it'll propagate it over the time points, take all those volumes, feed it into the growth modeling. Okay, so, but the problem is it's that first part, the human. So we've come up with a workflow where a human reader just has to look at that baseline scan pre-treatment and goes tumor, 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 very quick. Then the AI takes over and segments it in 3D, lines all up all the scans, propagates those, makes the measurements, feeds them into the kinetic software. So they're giving measurements that are more useful for that early phase decision making, improving probability of late phase success. Or getting you to a confident dose faster. That's another use case. But anyway, so sorry that took a long time, but I wanted to explain like why it is that this kind of collaboration where there's the human judgment of choosing and finding tumors. And by the way, people are working on AIs too that will do that. That's actually a surprisingly hard task. That's probably still a few years away before it's fully automated. But in the meantime, we can do this kind of thing where human judgment does one part and AI takes over for the rest.
And are y'all doing that for every cancer protocol that y'all have, or is it just you're just choosing some?
So this is really in a pilot stage right now,
Okay.
where we've developed a workflow and we're doing basically validations of that data, of that method as a way of predicting survival outcomes.
So have there been any moments where human intuition overruled AI recommendations, and what did you learn from those situations?
I can give a very simple and somewhat embarrassing example. So I had chat create an R6E3 deck for me just to show what's changed and why, et cetera. And the content itself was perfect. But my partner on the project just said, there's something about these citations that just don't feel right to me. So let me start looking. And every single one was an E2, or was it R2? I always forget. But anyway, the other one. And so it was completely wrong. And so, that I think is when I stopped trusting the citations. And what I've since done, because I have so many other subscriptions and when it's not confidential data, what I will do is have chat generate, and then Claude in particular, I find does a great job at finding errors in the citations, and then I still, depending on how critical the content is, will just double check it against the documents. But I find that having another AI check the other AI tends to help quite a bit.
And I think that's like a good lesson in there, which is like with AI use cases, the rule of thumb should always be generate but validate. And if you don't know the answer to the question you're getting AI to generate, you should be somewhat skeptical of the answer you're then getting back. So if it's helping you automate to an answer you already know, then it's fantastic, but you should always generate but validate.
Okay, and how have trial participants themselves responded to AI?
Yeah, I can take this one. So we probably do 10,000 plus interactions a week now with participants across voice, chat, text. And I think the answer is surprisingly well. If you were to say pre-AI, if you spoke to someone about their experience with robocalling and that sort of stuff, it would be a bad rep. And so I think we've seen that across the data that we have, 0.5% of people are furious that they're speaking to an AI and they immediately want to get off the phone. About 5% of people will transfer to a human if given the option. But I think what we've really learned is like the baseline that you're comparing this to of a patient experience within a clinical trial is generally quite low. And so if you're expressing interest to join a trial for asthma, for example, through Facebook, you know, the options at the moment really are like, do you want to wait a week or so for a human to call you, or do you rather be engaged and pre-screened and know whether you can actually join that study within 10 minutes of actually expressing interest? And we found that participants overwhelmingly pick the latter option, and we've ran those comparative tests and we have the data that proves that. So this isn't just a very, very biased opinion. We do have data that backs that up at this stage.
I'm interested, Tom, actually to know what you did at the back end to test for that, because a couple examples. One, I was listening to a podcast about a company called Hippocratic AI that, you know, calls, et cetera. And they actually, because they were venture backed, they hired 6,000 nurses to just ask questions over and over to test the responses. And then I recently met with another vendor, and they build other bots. So one is going to be the rage bot, one's going to be the mentally ill bot, one's going to curse out. You know, they try to, you know, with bots, testing bots. So I'm curious how you guys do that.
Yeah, so we do both. We don't have 6,000 people. We haven't got Hippocratic levels of money. We do have a clinical team who develops the agents. So medical doctors who actually build the agents and then sample those and make sure that they adhere to the protocols, the IE criteria, the ConMed list, etc. And then, as you say, we do synthetic patient profiles. So we actually pull them directly from the site's database. So we anonymize, de-identify patients with those same indications and same traits, and then have them play back against the AI agent with varying personalities. So as you say, someone angry, someone who wants to just stay on the phone forever, someone who's immediately trying to get off the phone, and we use that to test lots of different scenarios. I think like the broad lessons from this is like the AI is fantastic at chit chat and like moving, like very, very good at moving the conversation along, surprisingly so.
Yeah.
Really where it fails in a lot of cases that we've seen is like in these more logistical things, like if you're scheduling and it runs out of slots and it doesn't have something that it can offer the participant, it then doesn't know what to do. And so we've put a lot of effort into those kind of edge cases that you wouldn't really expect to have challenges with until you start getting these things into production.
Yeah. Okay, so Esther, so smaller and emerging biotech companies can be nimble, but they also might have limited infrastructure. What's worked for you in building trust and collaboration between teams and AI tools in your experience?
Yeah, so this has been really interesting, and I was probably like the worst person that my client could have picked to bring this AI tool on, because I don't even have social media, so I'm just like totally green. So at first, Tom and I chatted about kind of what is the best way to sort of bring this about. And what we found really helpful was, first of all, to have a really small team that started working on it in the beginning, and to effect some really good change management strategies. So we started a pilot program instead of, bringing this out onto multiple trials at a time that are in different stages in different countries. We chose a really, really small clinical trial that's only in one country, so we could really develop the tool to have a cultural connection with the patient, which I think is going to be really helpful. And also, in the fact that it collects clinical data, there's a lot of regulation around that, especially in the UK, where we're piloting this program. And so that part was really interesting too, in that we kind of picked the highest bar that we needed to meet, knowing that if we were successful there, we would be able to roll it out globally and on a much bigger trial to collect a lot more data across many different demographics. So I think those were important things. Really start small. And Kevin, you touched on this, educating the team. If people are skeptical, the biggest way you can win them over is by educating them and bringing them along with you on the process. So that's been really helpful too. And it's really piqued a lot of interest and a lot of great questions. Some great, some not so great. But it's been really fun to work through.
And the regulatory challenges, has it been hard to kind of navigate, or can you kind of speak on that? Because I think that's something that we're all concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. Really valid concern. And I will say, I wouldn't say that it's been hard or difficult. I would say it's been slow. It's been slow because it's a first time use for this type of a product, but that's what patients experience as well. It's their first time using it too. So at the site level, we found that they had, we didn't know this before, informational governance committees, but they were super excited to meet with us and to hear all, and every time we do meet with a group, we make sure that we have Tom and a regulatory expert on the call, a clinical expert, sometimes a physician, to make sure we have like a really sort of multidisciplinary approach so that we can field all of the questions. But and same thing for regulators. This is the first time they're seeing it too. So not really sure what to put in the package, but we're kind of throwing the kitchen sink at it and hoping that they'll negotiate with us.
Yeah.
Just to add to the regulatory point, probably a lot of folks are already aware, but if in case not, in January, the FDA put out a guidance to industry on the use of AI in regulatory decision making. They had a seminar, they had a big session yesterday where there was a discussion including folks from industry, from FDA, from academic institutions, et cetera, where they talked about basically what their expectations are, and the center of it is this credibility assessment framework that is basically risk-based. So it really depends on what the role of the AI is. The more risky the decision failure is, and the less humans are involved, the higher the risk and the higher the level of evidence you have to bring to them to say that they'll accept that data. But it is clearly, and it sounded from what the discussion the FDA yesterday that they are moving towards finalizing that draft guidance. Sometimes these draft guidances stay draft for years. And then just to round up, you said a multidisciplinary team. That's what I would say to anybody who's interested, who is developing an AI team in their organization. You need to bring together people who understand tools and the people who understand the problems. Because a lot of times AI tools and people who are really into the tools, they don't understand the nuances of the challenges that have to be addressed.
Right.
And then things kind of can go off the rails, or you're sort of solving a problem you don't really have. So that's what you need. You need a multidisciplinary team. And, we've pulled together, so I've pulled together a team, looking at the imaging side of this, where that has people from imaging, people from like data, like hardcore data science, statisticians, biomarker people, clinicians, regulatory digital health. You need a multidimensional look at the applications of these tools to clinical trials.
Yeah. So I often think about how AI fits into highly human patient-facing side of trials. How do we make sure AI supports the staff, the site staff, going forward? I know we talked a lot about your teams, but how do you think it's going to?
I mean, from my perspective, there's one very simple thing, because I think over the years, as a CRA and a lot of other things, we get all these years we were very excited about our new tool, and they're going to be very excited to have this, this iPad, and then Amgen comes and they've got another, and so forth. And meanwhile, the study coordinator's office is the size of a closet, literally. And there's been a lot of burden on sites for a long time, and I think one of the simplest ways is just literally to show them how to talk to it, to brainstorm about patients, to have the conversation. Even 6 months ago, it was like talking to Alexa, but now I'll have 45-minute brainstorming sessions on my way home. And I think if they're able to realize you don't have to log in, it's already on your computer, there's new tools, and just teach them how to use it, I think that's probably one of the biggest ways.
Yeah, I think the burden on the sites of all of the things with every sponsor has their own login. I think it gets to be like a lot for us. So hopefully this will make things a lot faster.
If I could just add one more thing to that, an AI tool collecting clinical data from a patient is going to give you a lot more of a robust outcome, a patient speaking to, even if it's just the AI voice agent, a lot better of a quality of and integrity of data than it would going into an app, for example, because at least this is a, two-way conversation where you were talking about ConMeds before, our med history. And so that replaces all the queries that eventually would need to be issued on data that was collected in an app and migrated into a clinical data set. So I think that's a huge time saving and frustration saving.
Yeah.
And I think as a tech vendor who primarily and historically is sold to sites specifically, I would say broadly, like the sponsor facing, the tools that sponsors provide to sites aren't built for sites. They're not built with sites in mind. They're built with sponsors in mind. And so I think what we found is that sites are actually very open to technology and actively adopt it. So Elevate uses Delfa and actively works within our system, and we've built it with that stakeholder brought into the room. And I don't want to speak for Devora, but I think you like it. And I think most of the technology that sites get sucks for them, and that's why they get frustrated. And so if you are deploying technology at a site level, you need to understand their needs and their perspective.
And what is one piece of advice you'd give to clinical operations leaders who want to make an AI a trusted member of their team? Nobody?
I would just say, again, I probably sound super simple, but having spent a lot of time convincing people and showing them, it's show them how to use it, show them how powerful it is, show them all the problems it can solve. And I think you'll quickly come to realize it's a co-pilot, it's your superpower. And I think that's particularly important because Harvard's head of AI was recently saying, and there are all the projections, who the heck knows, but within 2 or 3 years, we're going to have hybrid teams of bots and people, and agentic, the era of agentic AI is very much upon us. And I think that if they can learn, the old-fashioned way a year ago of just prompt engineering or talking to it, that it's going to become easier to accept that you're working alongside a bot.
So do you think it's going to take, our industry is very slow to adopt. Do you think we're going to be able to move that a little bit faster as far as adoption is concerned? I'm concerned a little bit about that
I'm
myself.
not convinced. I feel like it, especially in ClinOps, honest to goodness, we're still using spreadsheets. Right? It's just unbelievable. So I honestly think, I've run so many projections through deep research, and I don't know. I'm skeptical. I think you're going to have cutting edge organizations that are pushing the boundaries, that are producing people that are highly trained on it, and you're going to have a lot of companies that are very slow to adopt.
I agree with Kevin because I think it's big to just educate. But also, I think it became less scary when you think of the system as a coworker. You would want to get to know your coworker, know what their specialties are, know what they do. So talk to it. It is kind of like a bot, put in things, try to brainstorm with it. I think a lot of people go in just going, I don't know what to do. I don't know the initial prompts. Just being able to go in, ask a simple question, ask another, kind of get to know what it can truly do, because that's how you're going to learn how to do the best prompts. That's how you're going to learn to work with it. Is the only way you're going to learn is if you do it.
So that just to add to that though, that's one direction is telling them what it can do. The other direction is to go and say, what are your time-intensive tasks? What are the things you're spending many hours a week on that are kind of repetitive? Show me that. And then you show them how to solve that problem. That way you're not going, well, go in and see what it can do. It's what do you need it to do?
Right.
And then you show them how to do that. And then they'll find other use cases. Once they get their feet wet, they'll find other use cases.
I want to thank our panelists for the wonderful, wonderful panel. We are up on time, but we allow some extra time for 1, maybe 2 questions. I'll be right there.
after. We can stay after if folks have questions.
I'm a bit skeptical about the 2 to 3 year we're going to be working aside bots, only because I've been in the industry for 30 years and I'm still dealing with universities that are using paper. And I was told, 20 plus years ago, oh, we're all going to computers, everything will be automated. So I just don't get the warm and fuzzy feeling that we're going to be there like everybody says we're going to be there, because we're not there in research. There's still paper everywhere, so I don't know what your comments or your thought on that is. But I understand the excitement, and that's where we should be. I just don't see it happening.
Well, I guess I just... I'm building bots at home for fun, and I have zero coding experience. And the amount I'm building websites, I'm building web apps, that's never been possible. And that's just a simple, but we're sending rockets to space driven by AI, right? So, okay, I totally get the paper. I don't know the answer to that. And again, especially in ClinOps, we just insist on being forever behind. But I agree with you.
Doctor's office is still fax.
Yeah, probably not at most companies, but I do believe some cutting edge companies are going to be there very soon.
Well, I think on my end, like as a site and a site organization, if you don't move ahead and kind of get with the times, you're going to be left behind. So I would say to everybody that's in this room that's from pharma, look for the sites that are already ahead, because things will go faster for you. Stop going to the same people that use paper all the time, because it will always be an issue. It will never get better.
Yes, thanks for your presentation. Quick question. It seems like you all work to develop the use cases internally, using your own resources, building your own AI tools. So I'm wondering, how are your software and workflow vendors progress, and what are the pluses of using AI that is embedded in an existing application or workflow versus building bots to bolt in your workflows?
I didn't build mine. Tom did.
Greg, I think you gave a good example of that, of how you use the AI tool for existing imaging protocols and review.
Yeah, the challenge is that we have a team of 60 computer science PhDs who do AI, and and we have 120,000 patients worth of curated sequential scans I can use for training.
Yeah, in prepping for this panel, I did remind my large pharma and biotech colleagues here that a lot of small biotech, for some of my clients, don't even allow the use of AI because they think their IP needs to be so secure that I can't even ask a question in there. So I do think that is the case, and unfortunately, fortunately for larger organizations, they're much farther advanced.
Yeah, I would say from other speaking events and leadership roundtables, it's probably 85% of small pharma are just not going anywhere with it right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would say if you look around, I find if you do have a problem, you're like, oh, maybe AI solves this. I don't think identification of vendors to solve AI problems is going to be tricky. AI is plastered everywhere. There are lots of vendors that do this stuff, right? And so I think finding
Ask
vendors.
Gemini.
Yeah, exactly. Ask AI to find you AI. Go meta on it. So I think identification of your problem and finding a selection of a vendor. I think then there's a lot of uncertainty and angst around training on confidential information and all that sort of stuff. Ultimately, the organizations that a lot of the vendors are relying on under the covers, they will, and we have HIPAA agreements, we have confidentiality agreements in place. We've submitted with 2 regulators with these technologies, and so the vendors have these things lined up where confidentiality and privacy concerns can be overcome, and they shouldn't be a barrier to adopting these types of technologies.
I want to thank our speakers for the fantastic session.